Hi everyone, it's Jerry. I have a sharp game to share with you from the 13th and final round of the 2025 Tata Steel Masters on the white end Gukesh D, playing against Arjun Erigaisi. Erigaisi playing spoiler here. This was Gukesh's only loss in the classical portion. We start out here with Petrov's defense, and a not so common reply here by the knight. c4, most common f3, has its eye on the e3 square. We see that right here, eyeing up d5 now. It's defended in this game. The knight falls back. You could play with knight to c6, but you better make sure you've done your homework. Knight c6, knight d5. This is a Pac-Man continuation, the queens, bishops being exchanged. It's simply covered in this game, simple enough. And covered again, this here is a big focus. White's going to direct his three minor pieces on this square. Queen d7, two ideas, battery, support eventually for d5. There's still a pin to work out of. Opposite sides castles game. B pawn launch straight away. Not taken. This is going to invite some nice coordination towards black's king side. No thanks. Black presses in the center, has a fork in mind. b5. Knight goes to the edge here. Knight in the center is a move as well. Queen d3 is the best response. All right, goes to the edge. This is still there, but cut out with d4. All right, let's go after the king. Top piece. Remove this key defender from the king, launch the h-pawn. That's the plan here for black. White invites the queen into his camp here. He captures on h3. Now I want to highlight a computer line here. Really sharp idea. It wants to go with the bishop f3, giving up this exchange. And it says this pressure on d5, well, this point is going to end up collapsing. Top move from this position would be with queen to e6. Note, trying to hang on to the pawn with c6 would be crazy, giving white a file, as well as this big square for the queen. We'd be looking at a +5 evaluation. Queen e6 would be the best continuation here. In this situation, down, or I should say up the exchange here, black. But in this scenario, after queen e6, white could take still on d5 with the c knight. And the idea here is that if knight takes knight, there would be this clever bishop g4 winning the queen. A reason here to keep the knight on e3. Now, how this top line plays out, it looks at this bishop d2 move in the end. Problem piece. Not easily back into the game. Queen covering c4. If knight b4 here, it says the best is with bishop to b4. If knight b4, the rook can be activated. There's c4 ideas playing with the queenside majority. This here, unopposed light square bishop, a forever monster, really, in a position like this. There's not even going to be, well, there's no thought, really, of an attack against the white king, but certainly plenty of attacking ideas for white in this imbalanced state. Now, this top line is one where you actually give the material back, and at the end of this line, it is calling it ballpark plus 0.7. Computer chess. I don't know, you're going to find too many players pulling off the move. Bishop f3 in this position. You would have to have some pretty deep calculation and accurately assess that position several moves down the line. We have the capture on h3 in this game. And the follow-up, queen f3. More pressure applied to d5, but it can be ignored. Top move, h5. The idea, peel open the h-file, go in for mate. Now, in this position, Gukesh captures on d5 with the e knight. What's considered top is knight c takes d5. So I want to touch on a difference or two between these two moves. How it plays out in the game after this knight capture, black is able to continue with h4. That is a good move. However, if knight c captures on d5, h4 straight away would no longer be a good move. Let's see why. First of all, let me touch on the move played in the game. Knight e takes d5. h4 is played in the game. White would not, in this position, have the following move. Knight f4. It's not a good approach for white because black would have in this position the response queen f5. She would remain an active piece. There's a pin. There's an issue here on c2. Not that this is a winning approach, but the queen remains an active piece. If we backtrack here and look at the other knight capture, in this scenario, h4 would no longer be good. Let's see why. It's because after knight f4 in this situation, notice the queen would not have access to f5. The e knight is still around. In fact, in this situation, these two knights rob the queen of these 4 squares, and she would have to demote herself all the way back to d7 in this situation. White would be in the driver's seat here, considered winning here after bishop to d2. Liability here, the knight on the edge. An additional point behind the knight on e3 covers this c4 square. Now, if this top move was played here, again, in the game it was the e knight capturing, but if this capture was played, the best move for black would be to first exchange knights and only then play h4. But now, all of a sudden, white would have at minimum a draw. It is right around the corner. White would be there first, giving direction to black. Keep in mind, this is a time-sensitive position. We're working with an opposite sides castles game. White is there first. Threatening mate. The h-file, not yet opened. What do you do now as black? The best black would have in this situation is rook d7 to defend. Keep in mind, black is down 2 pawns right now. So this idea to defend, offering a queen exchange, that would be winning for white. Black's only way to keep this level would be to play rook d7, but then there's a check, and we could have this repetition. Queen going here to these two, the rook's going here, the rook going to these two. What else could black try here? I want to touch on one move. This one here seems sensible, but white would have a good response to that. White would be winning here after knight f4. In this situation, one of 2 things will now happen. The queens will be exchanged, or these minor pieces will be exchanged. If the queen moves, she's currently hit. If the queen moves, we're going to get the queens off. Queen e6 hits with check. And if the bishop swipes the knight, talk about a perfect piece. Yet again, there would be a mate threat on c7. After this response rook at d7, there's in fact only one move here for the queen. One safe square, queen g6. Notice what the bishop is doing. It is now pound for pound a best piece. There just in the nick of time, defending the mate threat, and it is also a great attacker. This would be a winning position for white. So black's best in this situation right here, after this queen gets active, the best is to repeat with the rook moves. Gukesh has a draw in his pocket at this point right here if he wanted it. Would he have gone for a different line? Who knows, but a draw was very close by here for Gukesh had he captured with a different, with the other knight, knight C. He captures with the E knight. I must admit, this would probably be the first move I'm looking at. You calculate both captures, but kind of drawn to this one first. For what reason? Well, it opens up the bishop's eyes. Erigaisi ignores it, doesn't take on this square, carries on with h4 in this game. Knight takes, knight follows, pawn takes knight, and from here, rook d1 is played. Some room is given for the king in case the queen gets to h2. It will no longer be mate. Computer also has its eye on offering a queen exchange. Maybe the queens go back and forth like this. If you want to play for more here as white, it says you could flick in g4, give up this pawn, develop your bishop, give up a knight because you have this idea, an issue on the sensitive c7 square. That would be kind of crazy playing like that, but it is a move, apparently. Not how Gukesh plays it. He opens up a square. H-file opens up. Queen, big responsibility, fend off the mate. From here, knight improves, and white's response is bishop to f4. And this turns out to be a losing move. The best way to hang in there as white is with rook to b1. It's looking at rook b1 here. Now, how it was played out in the game after bishop f4, the bishop goes to h6, and only a little bit later, this rook goes to b1. It wants to play rook b1 straight away, and from here it likes f5 as a response. If black responds to rook b1 in the same way as bishop f4, which is to say bishop h6, here's how white could continue. Again, a very time-sensitive position here with this opposite sides castles game. White would be there with rook b4, giving the knight a kick. It's not just about attacking the knight. Notice this nice lateral movement for this piece. All of a sudden, what's nearby for white is a queen exchange, and this is clearly desirable for white. The king, the white king, a bit more vulnerable here. You get the queens off, no attack against the white king, and this extra pawn really shows up for white finally. And the structure, not very healthy at all for black. Black cannot afford a queen exchange. This would have been a very nice resource to play rook b1 immediately. Now, how it played out in the game, some time was lost, we might say, for Gukesh. He plays bishop f4 rather than rook b1. Now, after this top reply, bishop h6, this bishop will now have to take a second step. He captures on h6 here. There is a threat to just take the bishop. You can't recapture with the pawn. Queen is hanging. Even if the queen wasn't hanging, that would be awful, opening up the g file. But this is a threat. Bishop h6 hits with tempo. Chop here, you can't take with the queen. There would be mate. So you have to take that second step. Some time was lost there. We get this recapture right around the corner now for black. Monster battery here on the h file. Queen comes back. Clearly, we keep the queens on. Black is still attacking here, and she's not going to just any square. She keeps pressure on something. That's a big prize. It's better than pressure on a pawn. There's a restriction on the knight. Rook b1 only now, but by now, it's too late. Rook d to h8 follows. Rook b4, pressure on c2, and now this little tricky b6 move. Pop quiz. How would you respond here? Feel free to pause the video. Okay. Going in for this, keep in mind, that's not going to go anywhere. The king could always slip out on f3. It's a different story if somehow this knight was covering f3, then you go in for the queen exchange, stack the rooks on the first and second ranks, and say checkmate. How to recapture here on b6? In the game, he takes away from the center, and this is correct. If you follow the general rule here, taking towards the center, this would let white off the hook. White would be able to respond with rook a4, attacking the knight, and allowing a pair of rooks to be exchanged. It calls this around -1. Says you could swipe on b7 here. All right. Black not allowing a pair of rooks to be exchanged. He takes with the c pawn. Rook a4 still. Knight b5. That pressure on the rook is showing up. We're trying to remove a defender of the rook. Deflect the defender. Rook d3 follows. Knights are exchanged. One more pop quiz. How would you respond here? Feel free to pause the video. All right, in the game, top move, king d8. These are the only two to consider. If you go to d7, you're going to lose. Queen enters with check. You could play to b8 and still be winning, but you would have to go into a rook and pawn ending to be winning. Black ends up playing it where the queens are going to remain on board, and this the game is going to be over in just a handful of moves. If you go to b8, white would have this move g4, and this is where you would now have to go for a queen exchange. Otherwise, you run the risk of, in fact, losing. The top move here in this scenario is queen h1. You go in for the queen exchange as well as a rook exchange. We get a pair of rooks off. And in the end, this would be a winning position for black. Black is up a pawn and has a more active rook, and that will be enough for black to win. Notice how things are different if black in this position meets g4 with queen h4. After queen h4, white gets the queens off, and this rook and pawn ending would be drawn. Balanced material still. If black tries something else, keeping the queens on, ducking the queen exchange, white would be winning. With queen g3 check, king a8, and then we would have the sacrifice followed up with a check here. You would have to block with the queen, and this imbalance, queen versus two rooks, is winning for white. So Erigaisi, well aware of this possibility, g4, queen g3 check. That's why the king is sticking around in the center in this case. Follow up from here, Gukesh plays f3. What other option is there? Black's ready to get down to this back rank. Guess who's not around to defend? These guys. They're all in third rank, fourth rank, nowhere close to helping defend the king. Black is ready to swarm in one way or the other. If rook f3 is played, this is where we could see the queen go in there, just mapping out a cool checkmate, no escape route. So that's not going to cut it. Rook f3. What about g4 or rook d3 to prevent the queen from getting in? Well, the reply can be the same as in the game. So let's just see what that is. And the move in the game is with f3, and the response is queen b5. Black is going to get into the back rank now. There is a fork of the rook and a square. Follow up, rook takes a7, Black goes in now for the check. White's reply is king f2. If you take the rook, there is a queen check followed up with rook takes queen. In the game, it is king f2, and after rook 8 to h2, white resigns. The queen is lost, and the king will soon be lost. So, very sharp game out of this Petrov's defense. And opposite sides, castles game. Not very common at all. Anyhow, what are your thoughts on this one? Feel free, as usual, to leave any feedback to this video in the comment section below. I hope you enjoyed it, and maybe took a thing or two away. That's all for now. Take care.